Good afternoon, everyone. Why don't we get started? It's wonderful to see a full crowd here. My name is Tsu-Jae King Liu, and it's my honor to host this event. I forgot to mention my preferred pronouns are she, her, and hers. So it's my honor as Dean of the College of Engineering to host this speaker event, the View from the Top series. This speaker series brings to the College of Engineering community leaders from industry so that we can learn from their experiences and their insights. And so today we're really happy to be able to host one of our alumni, Tara Bunch from Apple. But before I continue, I'd like to first acknowledge and thank our co-hosts for today's event, and that's the Engineering Student Council. Please join me in thanking them for their support. Also, I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome members of our Dean's Society. I really appreciate the support of the college, and it's wonderful to see many of them here to attend this event. All right, so I would like to now tell you a little bit about our speaker, Tara Bunch. We're really proud to count her among our alumni. She received her bachelor's degree from UC Berkeley from the Department of Mechanical Engineering in 1985. After that, she went on to earn her Master of Business Administration at Santa Clara University. And then after that, she applied her savvy in engineering and business together in Silicon Valley. So she worked for Hewlett Packard for a number of years, and there rose rapidly in the ranks to leadership positions. So there she held positions such as Director of Research and Development, General Manager, and Senior Vice President. And she's a visible leader, and so Apple actually recruited her away from HP in 2012 to join Apple to be responsible for AppleCare. Now, how many of you here have ever used Apple customer service? Wow. All right, so you have, within the last 7 years. Okay. So if you used Apple customer service within the last 7 years, you have Tara to thank for an outstanding customer experience. Right? Now, a lot of people have recognized Tara for her leadership, and so I just wanted to point out that just a few years ago, in 2016, Business Insider ranked her as the third most powerful woman in engineering. Pretty impressive. She's also been a strong champion for diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is one of our values, of course, in our college now. And so she's been a frequent speaker and supporter of events and groups such as Out and Equal Workplace Summit and also Lesbians Who Tech. So now we are really pleased to have her join us here on the stage to share with us her story and her insights gained from the road less traveled that she has been on. And after she speaks for about 10-15 minutes, she'll join me in conversation for a flowerside chat. Afterwards, at the end, we'll open it up to questions from the audience. Okay, so please join me now in welcoming Tara Bunch to the stage.
All right, thanks. All right, wow. Well, I've had a great morning here already. Spent the morning touring around Jacobs Hall and seeing all the really cool hands-on design areas. I can tell you, all I wanted to do was be about 40 years younger and starting my degree program here, because you guys have some amazing labs and capabilities and equipment. And for me, it was always about bringing designs to life. And that's an environment where you can just imagine incredible things. So very impressive. I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of my career journey. And it's definitely a road less traveled. You're going to see pretty quickly that no one would have planned the career journey that I've been on. It was definitely not a straight line, but it's been an exciting process for me, and definitely an opportunity where I've learned a lot of different things along the way. And for what it's worth, I'll share some of those with you, and some of it will be good advice, and some of it I would encourage you to throw away pretty quickly. So this should only take a few hours. We're going to start from the very, very beginning. That is me. I don't look anything like that anymore. It's frightening when your children look like you and then you look in the mirror and you're like, oh wow, I'm really sorry, because as you age, you're going to look more and more like me, and that was cute and this is not. But like most people, my early influences were my parents. And I didn't realize how really different they were when I was growing up with them. But my dad was an engineer, and so routinely in our home, he had big pieces of paper out, all these different things to draw with, and he was editing his designs and working on things and measuring things. And he had a pocket protector and all of that stuff that, he was kind of Dilbert in real life. And my mom, I picked this picture because I love that scarf. I don't think I've ever seen her wear a scarf, but it's just so 1960s. She actually had a business degree and then decided when computers were just, sort of starting to become consumer electronics, really got into computers. And so she and my dad would go and take programming classes together at the community college at night. And I just thought that's what everybody's parents does on date night. They go and program together. And so they had our whole house kind of set up with we had computers in every room. They were building more computers in the garage. They were copying software on big floppy drives, probably something they shouldn't have been doing, but there wasn't quite the copyright stuff that there is now. And they were doing this, trading software with friends, and I just thought everybody's family had computer parts everywhere and computers everywhere and these giant modems. And it was just one of those things in the background that I kind of took for granted, but it kind of stuck with me, and it obviously influenced kind of what I ended up doing long term in terms of tech. But before I got into tech, I decided to try a couple of other things. So I tried dancing, and then decided to move into more of professional drumming. And part of the issue that I learned early on is, as you notice, the admission's free here. So picking a career where things are free is a significantly limiting factor in terms of kind of putting food on the table. So I decided I needed a backup plan. So the backup plan was Berkeley. And a funny story about Berkeley is so remember my parents were off programming and building computers in the garage. I didn't have the helicopter parents that help you fill out your college application, that hire tutors years in advance to get you through the whole process. I don't think they even knew I applied to college. They were so unaware of what was going on. And I was their first kid, so they didn't have a lot of practice with this process. So I applied to Berkeley, and only Berkeley. I literally just sent my application in, and that was the only college I applied to. So this is one of those strategies I would recommend not copying. But nonetheless, they let me in, and I graduated from Berkeley, as you know, in 1985. So while I was at Berkeley, my first career experience was actually my internship. I'm sure many of you probably are thinking about internships. It made a pretty big impact on me, and it's something I highly recommend. Because as you're thinking about what you want to do, it's important to have done something that you can kind of compare it to. And so I worked at Procter & Gamble, and this was my job. I actually designed automation for the Loves and Pampers manufacturing line. I think that's the Cookie Monster. And it was really cool because I had an opportunity to work in an environment where I could see the things I was designing actually doing something. And that I really loved. I immediately realized I like designing things and then getting to see how they impact either the work environment or the manufacturing line, or they make something simpler or make something better. So I loved that part. I loved the automation. I didn't like the diapers. So that I decided was going to be short-lived, and I needed to move on to something else. Diapers would come back to haunt me later, and we'll get into that a little bit later in the presentation. So the next decision I made was I really wanted to go to HP. They were recruiting on campus, and HP was at that point, it was the pinnacle tech company to go and join. And it was located right here in Cupertino. It's kind of bordered by Wolf and Tantau and Prune Ridge. And I started right here and worked for a number of years on this site. And just as kind of a funny aside, there's something else there now, and it's Apple headquarters. So I don't know that I'd recommend this, but what I did is decided I wanted to work in a particular place. and then whatever comes there, that's who I work for. So, you know, not necessarily something that everybody does, but it worked out pretty good for me. Well, let's go back to HP for a minute. So what I loved about HP is it was a company that, it was a global company. It had a lot of different business units. I could be, you know, in a job in manufacturing operations 1 year and then move into, say, research and development a few years down the road. I could work on one product line, then move to another product line. And at this point in, you know, there's kind of a theme here. I didn't really completely know what I wanted to do. I just wanted to do cool things and see where it led. And HP was a perfect palette for me because it had so many options. I figured something was going to work out. Something was going to be the perfect job. And so I started in manufacturing engineering and then moved into kind of a R&D manufacturing engineering combo role. And as it turns out, was working in a lab in Deer Creek when the 1989 earthquake hit. And my entire lab was destroyed. So this is kind of the road less traveled. You don't get to decide every turn in the road. My entire team was picked up, moved from that little area that I loved so well between Prune Ridge and Tantau, and dropped into the middle of Fort Collins, Colorado, where there was a similar lab where we would finish our project there. And so that brought me to Colorado. And then after finishing that project, I decided I wanted to stay. So there was skiing, there were mountains, it was like a cool place to hang out. And I ended up working again on kind of a robotics is kind of a theme in my career as well. These robotic devices, I feel like I'm explaining a stagecoach to people in their 20s right now, but these things, it works like this. I'll show you. This one was called JAWS, and it would go up and down and take out optical drives or tape drives and insert them into a reader, and they were used for kind of secondary storage on big computer systems. And what I loved about it is that it went up and down, which was one of my top criteria for anything. Something has to move. But what's hilarious about this is that with all this movement and all this stuff, this thing has like less capacity than an iPhone today. So it was a little ahead of its time, I guess. The next thing that I did at HP was I moved. This was the first time I moved into a consumer electronics role. And I was super excited about it because when I would come home from work and talk about what I was doing, and it had something to do with some robot called JAWS that moved optical things in and out, tapes in and out, everyone's eyes would just, you know, glaze over. And this was the first job where I thought what I was doing was like cool to other people, not just me. And it was digital cameras, it was printers, photo printers, scanners, all-in-ones. And I would go home and talk about what I did, and people were like, oh yeah, I have one of those and I love it. And so I thought, you know, I really like this consumer stuff because people really relate to the products. And during this period of time, again, I moved back and forth from, say, like a manufacturing operations role into a product design role. Did several rotations in there. I started managing bigger and bigger teams. One of those roles was managing research and development for the scanner product line. And it was about that time that I'd done a lot of manufacturing roles, I'd done a lot of R&D roles, I'd done software, I'd done hardware, I'd done enterprise products and consumer products. And what I really, really wanted to do more than anything was to be a general manager. Because when you were at HP, the way that HP was organized around business units, which is a little different than, say, like how Apple's organized. And really that point in your career where you had enough experience doing enough different things that you got to run a whole P&L. It was like owning your own company. You would manage all the financials, you would be in charge of the group that would develop the product, you would decide on the roadmap, the sales, the marketing, the manufacturing. And I was like, it's going to bring it all together, this is what I want to do. And I really believed at that point in time, this is all I would ever want to do. I want to be a GM. So when you wish for something, sometimes it happens. And the funny story with this particular opportunity is it was the general manager of that digital camera business, the little digital cameras that have all been replaced by iPhones now. Those were a big deal then. And HP got into that business in an effort to drive photography, digital photography. And by driving digital photography, they hoped that people would print photos, and that was kind of the business model. So I applied for the role. Several months went by, crickets, nothing. You can kind of assume when you apply for a role and nobody ever calls you back that you probably didn't get the job. But it turns out I didn't hear anybody else got the job either, which I thought was sort of strange. And I'd heard rumors that they were thinking about shutting down the business, that the P&L was pretty upside down, meaning it was losing a lot of money. And there was sort of a belief that maybe we couldn't sustain this business inside the company and needed to do something about it. So I ran into the hiring manager about 3 months later, and I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, Larry, so did you guys ever fill that digital camera job?" And he spun around and he looked at me, he goes, "Do you still want it?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Am I the only applicant?" And he said, "Yeah." "You are." And so I was like, all right, I'll take it. But here's the deal that I thought was so cool about this job, is that nobody else wanted it. Everybody else was afraid of it because you don't want to be the general manager of most people didn't want to be the general manager of a division that was in so much trouble and where the job may not last very long. I mean, I knew that going in. Like, my job might be actually shutting this business down. And so I learned some of the best leadership kind of experiences and rules and approaches in this role, because my first general manager role was one of the toughest roles I'd ever been in. I'd never been a general manager before, and I have a business that's completely torpedoing. And so I'll talk a little bit about what we did to turn this business around. We ultimately did. One of my first meetings with Mark Hurd, he had just taken over as the CEO, and he walked in to meet with me within the first couple of weeks I was in the role, and he said, "Give me one reason not to fire you right now." And I said, "I've been in the role 10 days, which was about 3 more days than he'd been in the role. And he looked at me and goes, "Well, that's a good reason." And from that point on, it really became about engaging a lot of really great leaders across the company and saying, "I know I took this role on, but we need to collectively solve it." And so we went about a process of working with the teams, moving a lot of the R&D offshore, not a particularly new approach when you have a product line that's struggling. They were doing all the design in San Diego and all the manufacturing in San Diego, not a super cheap place to build a digital camera. So we ended up moving a lot of it to Singapore and to China. And some of the things that I learned through this process was to have a really super clear set of values. And this applied to every role I've taken since. Even if you don't know how you're going to do something, what a clear set of values gives you is what you're going to do. And so the how comes later, but at least you're clear about what. And then maybe what you're not going to do. The other thing that I decided early on was to be completely transparent to the team, is to tell them the business was in trouble, it might get shut down, we might all lose our jobs, including me, and that I needed their help to transition this business, to get it to a place where it was viable. And so we engaged the entire team in the process. We told them how many jobs we thought would likely move and no longer be in San Diego or in Colorado. And we allowed people to self-select whether they wanted to stay until the end and help with the transition. And we had incentive packages and placement packages. Or if they felt like, I'm out, I want to go find a job right now. This kind of stuff makes me really nervous. So we were completely honest with everybody. The outcome of that was that as a team, even up until the end, we were solving problems collaboratively. Everybody was bringing their best work to this, and I fundamentally believed that the business probably would have failed if we hadn't taken this approach. We would have lost too many people. The rumor mill would have gone crazy. People would have gotten nervous. The best people would have left. And instead, a lot of our top talent stayed to the very, very end, fully committed to transitioning the business. The other thing I did is I walked around, I talked to a lot of people in the company that had been GMs for a long time. They had, they weren't a brand new GM. They had seen a lot of different businesses and a lot of different situations, and I went around and I asked them what they would do. I laid out the entire problem and said, what would you do? What's your counsel to me? And tried to get the thought leaders in the company really engaged in helping me chart a path forward. And then it was about being humble. I think there's kind of a tendency when you become the person in charge to think, well, I have to be the smartest person in the room. And nothing could be further from the truth. You have to be surrounded by the smartest people, but you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. And in fact, as soon as you think you are the smartest person in the room, your IQ drops by about 100 points because you quit listening, which is the most important part of your brain. And then don't take things personally. When they didn't call me back, I didn't sit in my office and brood and think, well, you know, I'm a failure. I didn't get my first GM job. When people didn't like my ideas, I don't take them personally. This was something I learned a little bit later in my career. I tended to get, I think, overly invested in either a design or an idea and get really excited about it. And then I couldn't listen to criticism objectively anymore. And so one thing I will tell you that has come in handy throughout my entire career, it's probably the most important piece of information on here, is don't take things personally. In fact, when people criticize your idea, it's a gift. When people don't, you know, they have an alternative viewpoint on something, it's a gift. And seek it out and draw it out and use it because it will actually make whatever you're doing better. And if you fail and you're criticized for it, just absorb it, learn it, and apply it differently next time. But not letting your emotions get in the way and staying calm and just taking all that in as information, as data, as opposed to emotionally electrifying it, will really serve you well in life. It's helped me get through some really tough situations and realize if I'd let my emotions get involved, I probably couldn't have thought through it quite as well and wouldn't have ended up as good as it did in the end. All right, so let's go back to my career. So those are my leadership lessons. I talked about Mark Hurd. Some of you are kind of wondering, like, how did I end up in service and support? So I was on this journey, manufacturing, engineering, R&D, general management. I can tell you there was not a single day of my life prior to this that I got up and thought, what I really want to do is lead service and support. I had never called a service and support line in my entire life. I considered that a personal failure, that I couldn't figure it out on my own. But Mark put this process together inside of HP about 2 years after he joined and pulled together, it was some number like maybe 75 to 100 VPs across the company and put us in this kind of executive boot camp where we were kind of poked and prodded and evaluated and given assignments, and we lived in a hotel in Palo Alto. We were like taken from our homes and our jobs, and it really was like a boot camp, and with the goal of sort of understanding what each of us were really good at, but then what did we need to really round us out as a leader? What were we missing? And it turns out in my case, apparently, what I was missing was customer-facing experience, so really running an organization that interacts with customers on a daily basis. And so Mark asked me to take over HP's service and support organization. Like I said, I didn't even know we had a 1-800 number. It's the epitome of taking a job where you have zero competence. Like, I didn't know anything about our service and support structure. I didn't know what the current organization structure looked like. I'd never used our service and support before. So I was just coming in totally cold. And it turned out to be one of those moments where you accidentally make a career change that you didn't plan and you didn't think would happen. I actually thought it would just be like a maybe 1-year rotation, and I fell in love with it. It's been one of the most challenging, interesting, eclectic areas. There's never a dull moment, and it led to this role that I'm in today. And it led to it in a very interesting way. Not only did I get the opportunity to join Apple, which is my dream job, but what they were looking for when I came into this role was Apple wanted somebody that had operations background, had engineering background, ideally like an MBA or business background, maybe had run a P&L before, and also has service and support experience. That's a pretty broad range. It might be another example where I was the only applicant, which kind of seems like a theme with me as I get jobs where I'm the only one who applies. But I know they had a lot of great folks that applied for this role. And I was the lucky one that had meandered through my career doing so many different things that it made me kind of uniquely qualified for this very special role. And that's the role I've been in since 2012. It's been probably one of the most exciting times in my life, being part of Apple. If you don't know what AppleCare does, we have everything from when you go out to our support website, my team runs that website. If you tweet us, my team is the one responding to that. iTunes, Apple TV, iCloud, iPhone, iPad, any product support question, our teams answer. We have a sales group that works with all the sales teams across Apple and sell our AppleCare insurance programs and extended warranties as part of the product. We have a team of engineers that design fixtures and tooling and processes and software and diagnostics and analytics so that we can evaluate a product anywhere in the world in any one of our service channels and figure out what's wrong with that product and what repair needs to be done and track the product. We have teams that work with all the Genius bars globally, all of our ASPs globally. So I have everything from like procurement and supply chain, web design, contact centers, engineering, quality. It's such a huge, broad job. And having done it for now several years, coming up on 8, I'm realizing why they needed all those skills, because it's such a diverse group. And if I had just taken this kind of straight line through my career, I would have missed out on this. And so, you know, the other thing that kind of happened along the way, another unplanned thing is 6 kids. Nobody plans 6 kids. So this is my family. The oldest is actually this one here in the middle. She's almost 19. The youngest is 6, and she'll be 7 in March. So she's almost 7. She keeps reminding us of that. And then the 4 boys, including a set of twins in the middle. So 6 to 18, 19, somewhere in that range. I will tell you that in terms of leadership, this has probably been the toughest leadership role I've ever had in my life. Because unlike folks that work for you, they actually don't seem to think they have to listen. And everything's like this negotiation. And there's also, I don't know about you, but I'll be downstairs and they will literally text me what's for dinner. And it's like, really? Okay. And it's also been a learning for me. When I joined Apple, it was, I would say, mostly call centers in terms of how we supported customers. And watching them and the fact that I've never actually seen them, they think it's funny we call the iPhone a phone because they don't actually use the phone part. They don't pick up the phone. They don't call 1-800 numbers. They do everything online through social on the device. And for me, it's been part of what's inspired some of the journey that I've been on in my role at Apple, was really enabling that next generation to interact with us in the ways that they like to interact with us. So there are inspiring things about kids. There's other things too, but there are some inspiring things too. So here are kind of like, you know, you can use as many of these as you want or none of them, but here's kind of some of my little like ahas through life. Follow your passion. At least for me, it wasn't about setting this like straight line and, you know, taking a job because it was supposed to be the next job I should take. It was really taking jobs that in some cases they weren't obvious, or they were the job everybody else was afraid to take, or maybe it wasn't the cool, glamorous job, but it was a job where I was going to learn a lot. So follow your passion. Do something that you enjoy doing because you're going to be the best version of yourself when you're doing something you love doing. Be curious. I would have missed a lot of opportunities if I hadn't sort of opened myself up to what's new and different that I don't know about and ideas. So be curious. Ask questions. I'm, you know, obviously a little older than you, and I'm still learning. And just constantly be curious. Select roles that stretch you. Take risks. I think if you take a role and you're not a little bit scared, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. You should be a little scared. And this is my personal favorite. Apply for jobs no one else really wants. It increases your odds significantly that you'll get the role. And that no one's going to steal it from you either. But it also sort of is usually an indication that something, they really need someone to come in there and either turn it around or rebuild it. And it's a huge opportunity to not only learn, but to demonstrate yourself in a really unique way. So while I say it kind of laughingly, it actually has proven out to be a pretty good approach. Make time for yourself and your family. No career is ultimately worthwhile if you don't make time for the things you love outside of work. And although, I think there are about 6 kids in that picture, but I know you cannot fit them all into that little tiny VW. And then have fun. I think I'm 35 plus years into my career now, and I can't imagine spending this time doing something I didn't enjoy. So have fun. Have as much fun as possible. This is one of my favorite quotes. I love this. It kind of wraps up kind of my road, less traveled approach to life. But I get up every morning determined to both change the world and have one hell of a good time. Sometimes this makes planning my day a little difficult. I love that. I get up every day with kind of that approach, like don't overplan, be open to the moment, be willing to take a turn you didn't predict or you didn't plan, and have a great time along the way. And just to be consistent, my preferred pronouns are she, her, and hers. So thank you, and now we can do some questions, right? Down here? Which side?
Either side? All right, great. All right. Thanks so much, Tara, for sharing your journey and life lessons and career lessons. I actually wrote them down.
Oh, you did, huh?
So I don't forget. Excellent. I certainly agree with everything you said in terms of these insights. I was just curious. When you were graduating from college, I guess after the MBA, did you actually apply to more than one job?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, so I was actually working at HP when I got my MBA. So I started HP right out of Berkeley. So I had an offer from Procter & Gamble. I had an offer from HP. I think it was Quantum, a hard disk drive company, and Apple. And so I took the HP role because at that point in time, in 1985, if you remember, a lot of companies were, for the very first time in tech, were laying people off. In fact, there was a hiring freeze at HP, and I snuck in like right under the wire. And I wasn't really totally sure what I wanted to do, and I thought HP had enough different roles that I'd find something that was interesting, and the other companies tended to be a little bit more narrow. It was like Apple was doing Macs and hard drives, and at Quantum, and diapers at Procter & Gamble, but it seemed like a good opportunity. You said you were going to come back to diapers.
Yeah. I don't think you did.
Yeah, I didn't come back. So the 6 kids are the diaper story. We did, what did we say, 40,000 something diapers that I've consumed? Yeah. So we were just doing kind of the average diaper per kid per year, and I think it's about 40,000 diapers I've consumed. And I had this is really like kind of a funny thing. I had really clear what I was looking for in a diaper design when I picked diapers out for my kids. I like the little the ruffles at the edges because it kind of traps everything in.
It's very
Gotta have an
practical
opinion
for our
about
young
something.
people in the audience
It was
today.
a design thing.
Very pragmatic
Leaky
advice
ones
here.
and not leaky ones.
Okay. All right, so it's interesting. You've worked, the companies, Procter & Gamble, HP, and Apple are all global companies. Mm-hmm. Are there certain things that are important to be able to succeed working for a global company versus, a non-global company?
Yeah.
Just curious.
At least for me, one of the things that was really important to me was to actually travel a lot. So I think there's a tendency when you have a global company or a global organization and maybe the headquarters are in one place to sort of make everyone come to you to make decisions and to fly in and to be at headquarters and to have big meetings. And I found that just the opposite's really important, that you need to get on a plane and go there. You'll understand the teams and the environment and the markets and the culture much better if you go there. And so I've spent my entire career, including when I was at HP, traveling quite a bit. And it's just remarkable to me to watch countries like India that have evolved so much over the last 20, 30 years, and China. I remember when there was only like one big hotel in Shanghai, and now there's like hotels everywhere, and cranes everywhere, and buildings everywhere, and so just immersing yourself in the different cultures, different markets, different communities, getting to know your team by being in their environment and coming to them. For me, it created not only engagement within the team, so people really felt like they knew me and I was approachable and they could talk to me about things, but I understood their challenges a lot better as well. So that's one thing is you can't do it from you can't manage a global team from a video conference. Get out on the road and go see them.
Well, unless you have already met them and you know them and they know you.
Right. And once you've done that, then you can do some of that. But like, for example, I think I traveled 250,000 miles last year. And that's not an unusual amount of travel for me. So.
Wow. And your children must not see you as much.
Yeah, they don't seem very bothered by it, which is kind of a little concerning.
You can keep in touch by online, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
That
works
we
out.
text and,
That's great. So I know we're working hard to try to increase the number of study abroad or experiences abroad for our engineering students. And the curriculum is so tough, sometimes they don't feel good about taking time out from their studies. What other advice do you have for our engineering students in terms of how can they best prepare to become successful leaders, prepared to take turns in their career path and so on, like you did? What advice in terms of what they can do to make the most of their time here at Berkeley?
Yeah. I'll kind of go back to Jacobs Hall and some of the things that I saw there that I think are just really critical and important. One of the things I noticed right away is that it was an environment where you could have a lot of different disciplines working together. Artists and electrical engineers, computer scientists, mechanical engineers, industrial engineers, environmental engineers, a lot of different disciplines, both technical and liberal arts. And the real world is that there's going to be very few problems that you're going to be able to solve all by yourself, that don't require multiple disciplines, that don't require folks that have completely different backgrounds than yours. And so being involved in either projects or classes or the design center where you have an opportunity to work with people that have very, very different backgrounds and to design something or create something together, that's where you'll really, I think, get a sense of what do you love doing, and then how do you bring your own expertise but then leverage somebody else's expertise to create something that's even better than anything you could have done by yourself. And it's just so exciting to see that work, because that looks like what work looks like at Apple or at HP or at other companies. It's not sitting in a classroom with wood chairs that are all lined up facing the front. It's standing in groups, it's working on projects, it's getting your hands into things, it's debating, it's experimenting. And to the degree that you can expose yourself to those types of opportunities and classes and educational experiences, it'll make a huge difference in how comfortable you feel in your first role, and also just your kind of sense of self and what you really love to do.
Great. I could ask more questions, but I'd like to leave at least 10 minutes for the audience to ask questions. And so I'd like to open it up to the floor for questions. And we'd like to give preference to students. And when you ask your question, before you ask your question, please introduce yourself to Tara, your name, your major, and your year. Okay, we have a question in the back.
Hi, I'm Emmy. I'm an industrial engineer first year. I had a question about being a woman and being a member of the queer community in the field of STEM, and like some of the challenges you faced with that and how you overcame it.
Yeah, it's a good question. It was kind of a journey for me. I started in the Bay Area for HP. HP had a super diverse workforce here in the Bay Area. They had an active pride group. I went to Berkeley, again, a very diverse and liberal environment. And so to be honest with you, my first 4 or 5 years at HP, I was completely unaware that there was even a challenge there. I was in this little bubble of the Bay Area where, you know, diversity is wonderful and everyone's great about it, and I didn't sense any issues or discrimination. But where I got dropped on my head was when I was moved to Colorado in 1989. And if you remember the political environment in Colorado then, there was a proposition that was passed a few years later that allowed people to discriminate based on sexual orientation or gender identity. And the politics in Colorado got very interesting. And it was the first time that I was in an environment where I was like, you really do have to be visible as a leader. And it's not that I was not out, I just didn't think I had to talk about it at work, or, you know, it was just like, okay, like whatever. But once I got to Colorado and I could see the stress in our employee groups and the fact that they felt almost under attack from the politics in the state, I felt it was really important as a leader that I was really visible and available. And that's when I really got involved. It's actually how I got involved with Out and Equal. Was our Pride group in Colorado wanted to bring that organization to Colorado for their annual summit, and I agreed to sponsor it and be a part of it, and I then ended up joining the board at Out and Equal. And so for me, it's been about being visible and being just my true self at work. Certain, you know, I guess, work environments are like, you know, you go to work and it's all, I'm kind of from the generation where you go to work and you go home, and like those two things don't blend. And I really had to make a conscious decision that I'm going to bring my whole self to work. And I had Emily, I was pregnant with Emily about that time. About 2 years after I joined the Out and Equal board, I became pregnant with Emily. If you're, you know, same-sex couple and you're pregnant, you're out. Like it's all over with at that point. And you know, people would just come and ask me about it, and I would just be really honest and tell them, you know, about my family. And then the other thing is that once you become a parent, you realize that it's not just about you anymore. You know, you're a same-sex couple and you take your kid to preschool. Well, they're going to interview you, and they're going to ask you about your family. And the other parents there are going to ask you about your family. And the other kids are going to talk to your kid about your family. And one thing you figure out is that, you know, if you don't show up in front of your kid 100% confident about who you are, they won't be confident about who they are. And so that becomes kind of the big responsibility that you have as a parent. So once I crossed that bridge, it was like, I've just been kind of out my whole life. And hopefully, you know, set a good example for them.
Absolutely. Another question? In the back? Two in the back.
Hi, so my name is Peter. I'm a first-year civil engineering major. My question is kind of an opposite to challenges. So what do you think are some of your most enjoyable and triumphant moments in your career? Thank you.
Wow. I would say that it's not really a specific thing, but some of the most enjoyable and triumphant I guess, periods of time and experiences for me have been around seeing people that were part of my team or that reported to me, seeing their careers grow and feeling like that I played some role in helping them along the way. There's nothing like seeing people that you hired and groomed and developed and supported, seeing them succeed. For me, that's really where it kind of comes together. You know, seeing them promoted and seeing them succeed. There were lots of projects that were super exciting, but the people side of the business for me is some of the most rewarding. We get a lot of customer letters from people who either something about our product changed their lives. With some of our health products now, we have people that send us letters and tell us how we saved their lives. And those things, you know, they just kind of, they hit you in a way where you realize what I'm doing is mattering. It's making people's lives better. It's not just a job. It's not just a career. It's having an impact in the world in a really positive way. And for me, that's just incredibly motivating, is when you're impacting people's lives, both your teams and their development and well-being, but also your customers.
Excellent. I know there's another question in the back before going here. Mr. Okay, let's go to the front then.
Thank you. My name is Hong Long. I'm a visiting scholar right now in ECS department. Yeah. So my question will be, you talk about a clear set of value to lead, right? Can you talk about yours?
Yeah. Some of them you saw a little bit. I really believe in transparency. During the period of time where we were sort of trying to figure out how to deal with the digital camera business, there was a lot of secrecy around it at the time. People were going in rooms and having conversations about, impacting people's jobs, impacting where their jobs were. And it would turn out that over the course of my career, you're faced with sometimes really hard decisions. Decisions that impact your teams, that impact, other people, their well-being, their careers. And I found through that process, by just standing up in front of my team and telling them the truth, even if it meant all of them were going to run for the hills and I'd be the only one left running this business, it turned out to be such an impactful decision in terms of establishing with my team trust very early on as a new GM. They believed that I would tell them if something changed. They believed there was some piece of information they needed to know about, I would tell them. And that level of trust, when you have trust in a team, you can do incredible things. When people aren't spinning on what do they really mean, or what are they not telling me, or rumors and other things that might be happening. It takes a lot of politics out of decision making when you say, I'm always going to be incredibly transparent. So you don't have to second guess. You don't have to spend a lot of time figuring out who likes who, or if there's some sort of favoritism. It takes just a lot of noise out of the system. So for me, honesty and transparency is really, really critical. It's kind of a fundamental value for me. And there's a lot of other important values, but that one's kind of my North Star, is truth and honesty and trust.
Great. Another question near the front?
Hello, I'm Akira. I'm a first-year grad student in mechanical engineering. The question I have is, can you talk a little bit about some of the toughest decisions you've had to make in your career?
Toughest decisions. I think some of the toughest decisions I've had to make have been where I had somebody that wasn't the right person for a role. They weren't necessarily, they weren't smart or maybe not capable of doing something else really great, but they weren't the right person for that role. And having those conversations, they can go a couple of different ways. And again, it was kind of the approach that I've taken around truth and honesty and transparency. It's sitting down and having that conversation with a person and saying, this isn't working, and not making it personal. It's like, it's just not working, and here's why it's not working. And here are the things I'm hearing and the things I'm seeing, and just being honest about it. Those are some of the toughest conversations, because people obviously, a lot of their identity is wrapped up in what they're doing, and you can kind of get into this mode where you feel like giving somebody honest feedback is a mean thing to do, but if you do it right, it's a gift. And the only thing I've ever felt guilty about is sometimes you come along and someone's been in a role for a while, and everybody's had this feedback for them, but they've never received it. And you become the first person that tells them the truth. And so the thing that I learned along the way is it's more important to give people regular, honest feedback so they can adjust and grow and develop, so you're not having that conversation in 2 years where it's stacked up and it's so bad that people have lost confidence in them. And so I guess I would say some of the toughest conversations could be avoided by having the right conversations much, much earlier. But those have been some of the, anytime it affects people, those are much more impactful. I mean, you can make hard decisions about things all the time, but the people decisions are the ones that always kind of, your stomach churns a lot. lump in your throat, and so those are the ones that are the hardest, for sure.
Great. Okay, maybe one more question from the audience.
Thank you so much for your insightful talk. My name is Samyukta. I'm an engineering physics first year major. I guess my question is, you obviously have multiple identities. You are so involved with your work. You have a family. I just wanted to know, at some point, what do you do to kind of to find your own identity and not that of your work or that of your family? Is there something you fall back on a regular basis?
Well, it's still a journey I'm probably on. I'm hoping that there's going to be some more self-discovery in retirement. We'll see, right? My favorite thing to do is to go running. It's not like a super inspiring hobby necessarily, but I love to run. And everywhere that I travel in the world, I try to go out running because you see a part of the world that you don't see when you're driving in a car or you're sitting inside a hotel looking out the windows. And so I run cities. And I can go decent, it's not fast, that's why I can see a lot of things. It's a slow run, but I can do 6 to 8 miles a day pretty easily. And so I'm just kind of clunking along like a little billy goat, looking around and checking things out. But it's a time where I'm like observing. I can kind of get in my head. I can block everything out. I can just kind of think. And in some of my most creative times, I'll come back from a run and have it solved a problem that I couldn't figure out before I left. So that's kind of my me time. In terms of kind of finding myself, I think I'm still discovering who that is. My life is pretty consumed with work and family, but back to follow your passions. Work and family and life, they don't feel like 3 different things. I am so excited when I'm at work every day. I love what I do. I love the people I work with. They're like my family. They see me more than my family, it turns out. And my kids they're very independent. They're all very unique. I'm not a helicopter parent either. I can't afford to be because I'm practically, in airplanes and helicopters constantly. But they're really independent and independent thinkers. And I think maybe, I don't know, there's part of me that sort of thinks if I hovered around them more that, maybe they would be more in my shadow. And they're not. They're very, very unique, each one of them. And then fun is, traveling around, doing my job, and going for runs in new cities every day. So I've kind of blended together. It works for me. I'm sure there'll be another chapter at some point, hopefully. And maybe I'll take up a hobby like, I don't know, what is that, curling? That seems like a really, it's like an Olympic sport. Seems good.
All right, well, thank you so much, Tara, for sharing with us your story, your insights, and your advice.
Oh, thank you.
Please join
Thank you
us.
very much. Thank you. Oh, wow. And a gift?
Token of our appreciation.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much. Wait, we should have the student. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Thank you all for
Wow.
coming, and we hope to see you at future events. Go Bears!